I mean, from everything that I put behind me and what I grew up on, that was a big success in my life as a kid, and that I got to do those things that a lot of people at the time, that I didn't get to do. Was without a doubt when I teleported. Is one of the concrete affirmations was, where did the city go? Where did the buildings go? And freeway and everything. The building that I was in.
What did the planet look like? What did Mars look like?
It had a really light blue sky. And it was it was deserty, and there was one of the things of being an amateur geologist was that there was a lot of clay around, and it had a very reddish ground. Distant was slightly lighter. Just very deserty. It had a chemical feel to it.
Did you see any critters, animals, anything like that running around?
I didn't. I saw on this particular one. I saw bushes, very small bushes, very small weeds and stuff.
Did you see any running water?
I did not.
You did not.
Not on this show.
And tell me, Brett, about Ed Dames' involvement with this. This fascinates me because, he's been a guest on this program for years, and he has never brought this up, ever. So,
no. He was our instructor at College of Siskiyou.
Was he a good teacher?
He actually very much was. Very attentive. He handled everybody very individually and very systematically.
Okay, and you two are sure it was Ed Dames?
Yeah. Absolutely, without a doubt. We were...
do you keep in touch with him now?
No.
Andy?
Yeah, Ed is one of my Facebook friends, and I've sent him a number of letters urging him to come forward and embrace the purposes of the Truth Movement and reveal his involvement, really not just in the CIA's Mars program of the early 80s, but he was also an individual that I worked with on a very limited basis in the Montauk chair apparatus when I was a child participant in DARPA's Project Pegasus in the early 70s. So Ed and I actually have a lot in common. I mean, we were involved in the early days of time-space exploration by the U.S. government, but then when the U.S. government selected a direction for that time travel to go, and the destination was Mars, Ed entered that program as well as one of the instructors for the CIA Army people that were training individuals like Brett and I to take the jump room to Mars and survive on a surface where there were, a variety of different predator species, some of which we could outrun and some of which we would not be able to outrun. So he was a brilliant instructor. I mean, he would give us 3 or 4 sentences of factual information, very hard-boiled information about Mars, and then maybe put in a joke to kind of relax us about the startling information that he just shared with us. He was coming by our evening parties, first at the dorms there at College of the Siskiyous, and then when we moved over to the Finlandia Motel. So we're certain it was Major Ed Dames.
All right. This episode, going to Mars, why did it stop?
I don't think it has, George. I mean, one of the really startling things that Major Dames shared with us during our training was that he made a statement that Brett and I have corroborated down to the word, verbatim, and that was, he stated, and this is summer 1980, he stated that of the 97,000 people we have thus far sent to Mars.
97,000?
That was the fact statement regarding how many have already been sent. He said of those 97,000, only 7,000 have survived on the surface after 5 years. I think he was addressing both the settlers that they were putting in place, but also those who were being sent, and hopefully with the intent of quickly returning to Earth, as Brett and I were.
How'd the other 90,000 die?
Presumably from predators, and also maybe from privation, in the sense that they were living in rudimentary structures on the surface, There's very little water on Mars. All of the food would have to be gained either through hunting or by having provisions supplied by a jump room, which means you'd have to get, let's say, from your little cottage back to one of the jump room facilities to pick up provisions. So I presume that those 90,000 were either eaten or basically starved to death on the surface. But we looked at each other, and this is how strange the material was in the class. I mean, Brett was 13 when we were being trained. I was 18. He was 14 when he first went up. I was 19 when I first went up. And we were looking over at each other in class going, did he just say that? That of the 97,000 that were sent, only 7,000 have survived? But George, this was 31 years ago. We have, during those 31 years, we have the estimate provided by the brilliant researcher David Wilcock that the U.S. colony on Mars may now number 500,000. I mean, we have the picture that of one of the large bases that Bob Dean revealed publicly for the first time at the European Exopolitics Summit in Barcelona, Spain, in 2009. We have the great-granddaughter of a president revealing that she was invited to join the secret U.S. colony on Mars. So I believe in those 31 years, or now 28 to 31 years since Brett and I were going up there regularly between 1981 and 83, that there are bases on Mars that may house literally hundreds of thousands of Americans.
Where would these bases be on the planet?
Well, they would be in the middle ranges of the northern and southern hemispheres because of the more temperate conditions at those latitudes. I don't know specifically where they are, and for that matter, we never learned where the jump room facilities were that we were being sent to.
Okay, and Brett, when you were there, you also encountered Barack Obama.
Yeah, that was when I teleported. I went outside, and there was somebody on my right, right near the wall, which turned out to be Andy, or at least was Andy when I turned around after I got to the edge. But there was a ravine over to the right, about 150 feet, and I went immediately over there to look around, and I was standing right on the left of Barack Obama.
Was he a nice guy? Did he befriend you at all?
He didn't say anything at all. He was looking around. He was basically self-absorbed of what he was looking at or what he was learning, and just kind of gave a little bit of a nod and walked back in. That whole event lasted about 30 to 40 seconds.
In Alfred Weber's article on both of you, he writes that Barack Obama, whose name at that time was Barry Soetoro, he was identified along with Andy as future presidents.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe I could pick up that anecdote, Brett.
Right.
What happened was Barry Soetoro was sitting in front of Brett. This occurred in the class in Major Dame's class. Barry was sitting in front of Brett. Behind Brett was seated his father, Thomas Stillings, of Lockheed during those years. I was sitting next to Brett, and behind me was my father, Raymond F. Breshaga, who was an electrical engineer for the Ralph M. Parsons Company.
All right, and this is that little college near Mount Shasta.
Right.
Okay.
And my dad was essentially the chief technical liaison between Parsons and the CIA on teleportation. So he was auditing the class in the same way that Brett's father was, and that Barry Soetoro's mother, Stanley Ann Dunham, was, in the sense that their children were enrolled, but they also had long-standing ties to the CIA as a result of their work. And Barry Soetoro stood up to talk to Ed Dames, and Tom Stillings leaned into the aisle between our two sets of chairs and said, "Brett, how does it feel being in a Mars training class like this with a future president of the United States?" referring to Barry. And before Brett could answer, my father thrust two fingers into the aisle and, looking at me, stated, "Two future presidents."
Do you have any political aspirations?
George, actually, I've decided to run for president in 2016. I'm going to give my Mars...
Are you really?
Yes, I'm going to be announcing...
Now, if you win, you should, based on this futuristic glimpse into Mars, right?
Well, my father wasn't the only individual with ties to the CIA to talk about a Breshaga administration. Courtney M. Hunt, who was the career CIA officer who gave me additional training for Mars. I mean, he showed me how to use the respiration device. He gave me a suicide pill in the event that I was cornered by one of the predators. He took me to Lockheed and I took part in a visual simulation of looking out for predators on the surface. Over multiple conversations, 20 years after we were going to Mars, Courtney Hunt of the CIA revealed that I, at some point in my life, reached the White House. Now, that might not be when I first run in 2016, but it was something that was corroborated by both my late father and by literally the CIA agent who trained me for Mars.
Well, you'd be about 54, 55 in 2016, right?
Right, and so I decided to run in 2016, but I was never given which election I win. It was just the conviction of my father and Mr. Hunt that it was something they were aware of. Now, Brett's father, Thomas Stillings, was astonished by that because he entered that classroom knowing that the African-American individual, Barry Soetoro from Hawaii, who had just done a year at Occidental College, was a future United States president. So that really goes to the high strangeness of what we experienced. And it also begs the question, why did the CIA decide to put at least one, possibly two, future American presidents on Mars?
At risk.
Correct. I mean, there's many explanations. One is that they were attempting to prepare us for the awesome responsibilities of being president of the United States and leader of the free world by subjecting us to the experience of going to another planet when we were still in our late teens, early 20s. Another possibility that I've considered is that because they were able to identify future events, including our identities as president, they knew we would reach that point in time alive, so they were simply trying to use information that they had about people from the future and involve them in this program, and that would optimize or maximize the number of people who would survive the experience.
When did you realize that Barack Obama was that Barack Obama that you saw on this Mars program?
Well, this gets very complicated because you may recall that when I first appeared on your show, I mentioned meeting Barack Obama in West Los Angeles in 1982.
I remember.
When he had transferred to Columbia and I was still completing my education at UCLA. I used that anecdote to describe the fact that he and his friend knew that he was going to be president. Not that he aspired to be president, like you aspire to pitch for the New York Yankees, but they knew to a dispositive certainty that he was destined to be president. But at that time, a heroic individual named William Brett Stillings had not entered my life. Brett contacted me for the first time 6 months after I first appeared on Coast, and we didn't really compare notes about our Mars experiences until June of this year. So actually, when I was on Coast narrating that that meeting with Obama that I can remember occurred in West Los Angeles, I was still blocked about my Mars training and visitation experiences. But now we know that one of the individuals in that class was, in fact, Barry Soetoro, who we now know as the 44th President of the United States, Barack Obama. But I should add, George, there were two other individuals of note that are among the 5 of the 10 young people that we can identify. The sole female in class was a brilliant young freshman at Caltech. Actually, she was enrolled in a PhD program in mechanical engineering at that time after entering Caltech at age 16. And that was Regina Elvira Dugan.
Okay, that's where she comes.
Right, who President Obama named the 19th director and the first female director of DARPA 6 months after he was elected. So Regina became the director of DARPA, the very agency that gave the United States its time travel capability, on July 20th of 2009. Just recently, Brett and I have identified a 5th individual among that class of 10 teenagers. When we began our training, for the first week, the class was attended by a future United States astronaut. And that was somebody literally 5 days younger than me. And we're happy tonight in a Coast exclusive to reveal that person's identity.
Who is that?
The young future astronaut who was sitting to the far left in the back, in other words, to my left in the back of the classroom, was William Cameron McCool, who was later joined the conventional space program and sadly perished as the pilot of the Columbia.
Yeah.
And so William McCool was right in that core cohort with Barry Obama and I.
Także Jaśku, oto niespodzianka, że Obama z Marsa.
Age of the 10 teenagers. Brett was really the
Mówiłem, że po
outlier.
komputerze coś będzie następnego. Wynaleźliśmy komputer, a teraz to, że Obama z Marsa.
We would not be talking about these astonishing facts.
Unbelievable. All right, Brett, I wanted to thank you for popping on here to talk with us about your trip and this incredible story, and this truly is incredible. And as we approach the top of the hour, we're going to bring in Laura Eisenhower. She was related to the late President David Eisenhower. She's the great-granddaughter, and we'll let her tell you her story when we come right back on Coast to Coast AM.
Co tam ma Chruszczow
Get ready for more.
do Obamy?
Here we go.
Co tam ma Chruszczow?
This video will present irrefutable and scientific proof that will establish beyond any reasonable doubt that Michelle Obama is in fact a man who prefers to present himself and who prefers to dress up as a woman. This video will prove that the person commonly referred to as the First Lady of the United States may be the First Queen at best, but he most certainly is not a lady. Let's find out why. This video will examine the following. It will examine Michelle's male hands, male shoulders, male torso, male genitalia, and overall male proportions. It will also look at how a carefully designed wardrobe, a wide hairdo, a persistent facially distorting smile, and carefully selected press photos have all succeeded in suppressing the revelation of Michelle's undeniable male physical form. While this information is controversial and shocking, to say the least, it is being shared because it is the truth. It is being presented so that people can stop living the lie that is being dished out by the U.S. government and the mainstream media. Many people are unfamiliar with the more subtle physical differences that can be found between men and women. While Michelle Obama works very hard to distort the more obvious differences, he fails miserably at hiding them all. Let's take a close look at some of the male traits that he has failed to conceal. We will begin by looking at the hands. The scientific community has known for a long time that a man's ring finger is typically longer than a man's index finger. Here are two clear pictures that illustrate the differences in ring finger proportions on male and female hands. Mother's finger is visibly longer than his index finger, while it is not uncommon for a woman to have the ring finger and index finger at very similar lengths. It is almost unheard of for a woman to have a visibly longer ring finger. See for yourself by looking at both of your hands. Relax your hands. Put them flat on a table. Pull the fingers together and notice the length of your ring finger. Now compare it to the length of your index finger. Your hands will now testify against Michelle Obama every time you look at them. If we look at this x-ray of a man's hands, we can see how the bone structure of the ring finger is visibly longer than that of the index finger. If we look at an x-ray of a woman's hand, we can easily see that the tip of the ring finger appears to be slightly shorter than the index finger. In this photo of Barack and Michelle's right hands, even at a distance, Michelle's ring finger is noticeably longer than the index finger. In fact, the ring finger is so long that when we compare it with the one on the man next to him, it is easy to see that the male trait of prominent ring finger length is even more pronounced in Michelle.
Obama, I love you.
Here we see a person holding up their hand. By the ring finger length, it is safe to conclude that he is a man.
Obama.
Here we see someone whose ring finger length clearly shows that she was born a female. But in this photo, wait a minute, Houston, we have a problem. The ring finger is noticeably longer than the index finger, proving that Serena Williams, the famous tennis player, was in fact born a male. Both the shoulders and flamboyant behavior are quite telling as well.
Leszku,
Here is a good photo of Michelle's hands.
a może to
The
jest
ring
drugi syn
fingers are
Boży od
both
Jahwe
visibly
Boga z
longer
Marca, który
than
będzie tu
the index
ukrzyżowany?
fingers. Once again, we have a clear view
Oh,
of
yes,
the
yes,
hands.
yes.
It is undeniable. Those are the hands that emerged from the womb on a male
Obama.
child.
To nasza mama.
Now that we have established that Michelle has the hands of a man, let's look at Michelle's shoulders. The shoulders are
Shoulders,
surrounded by
muscles.
bulging
Ramiona.
muscles that appear to be very masculine. Notice how the carefully tailored clothing hides the neck muscles. Let's find out why. Both the neck muscles and the bulging shoulders look like they belong on a man. In this photo, the hair and the clothing both serve to camouflage the neck muscles. Michelle's face may appear quite feminine to the undiscerning eye, but after taking a closer look, isn't it amazing what the very best makeup artists and hairstylists can do to any person who has enough money? And to help add to the illusion, Michelle often slouches forward. This is done to make the shoulders appear smaller, but the masculine shoulders remain.
Okropne.
Wild hair and dangling earrings can pull the eye away from the shoulders, but once you have spotted them, they just don't seem to go away. To make matters worse, men have more prominent brow features than women. As you can see, Michelle's eyebrows are generally painted on in such a way that they wrap around the male skull bone that protrudes out at the eyebrows. Close-up images of the eyebrows reveal a tremendous effort at wrapping the paint all the way around this very prominent male facial feature. Once again, the painted eyebrows do not match the size of the brow bone. Now, what most people do not know about human anatomy is that the body is naturally proportioned based on the ratio between overall body height and the size of a person's head. In this illustration, you can see how perfectly proportioned a typical human body of each gender is. This illustration also reveals a description of how the shoulders are measured. On a woman's body, the shoulder width is typically equivalent of 2.5 times the width of her head. Here we have an example of a healthy woman. As you can clearly see, her shoulders are about 2.5 times the width of her head. A man's shoulders are typically the equivalent of 3 times the width of his head. In this illustration, it is easy to see that this person is in fact a man based on the width of his shoulders in relation to the width of his head. And here we have an image of an extremely athletic man whose gender is confirmed by the width of his shoulders in relation to the width of his head. Now, if we take an objective look at Michelle, we see that the shoulder width is not compatible with the shoulders of a woman in relation to the size of the head. The dress, the pearls, the fancy hairdo, and makeup can redirect the observer's attention away from the proportions, but all the illusions cannot make the physical reality that Michelle is a man go away. Now let's take a closer look at Michelle's body proportions. Notice in this illustration that the height of a typical healthy man is roughly 8 times the height of his head. The height of a typical healthy woman is roughly 7 times the height of her head. This illustration reveals that Michelle stands at 8 heads tall. At this point in human history, there is no amount of surgery that can change his body proportions. His overall height is exactly
Także widzisz, takie tajemnice.
No tajemnice są, mówię, że drugim wynalazkiem po komputerze będzie to, że Obama pochodzi z Machsen. Z Machsen. Obama, tyś nasza mama, przyjechałaś z Marsa przez Yokohama. Obama, tyś nasza mama.
Jakie to jest wszystko skomplikowane. Jego historia, jego pobyt na Marsie, jego współpraca, on był tam instruktorem w ogóle. Z tego co zrozumiałem.
No mówię ci, że to, co ja mam opanowane na blask. To jest to.
No powiedz dokładnie, kim on tam był.
No instruował, uczył techniki, jak komputerowo, wiesz, zapisać się na wieki wieków. Amen.
Ale jaka była jego rola na Marsie? Nie bardzo zrozumiałem, może ty lepiej przeczytałeś.
To jest karta zamknięta, on tego nie wie, dopiero się dowie, jak będzie, wiesz, po śmierci. Ale numer. Ale numer i jaka robota.